Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in this Gaming.com video, we're going to be discussing AMD's Navi graphics architecture because new rumours and news has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. Recently, Nvidia have launched the the RTX 20 series of cards, including the top dog, the RTX 2080 Ti. But there are a lot of people who are unsatisfied with the RTX series, primarily because of pricing, which is a massive topic in and of itself. Combine that, of course, with the lack of ray tracing titles and DLSS, and many are just plumb waiting to see what AMD can bring to the table. The rumours, for Navi at least, is we're going to see a couple of variants, Navi 10, Navi 14, and finally Navi 20. The focus for this video mostly will be on Navi 10, and some rumours that have popped up today on the website fudzilla.com, who are citing their own internal sources, tell us that Navi is actually doing rather well in AMD's laboratories. To clarify what I mean by that, there are 2 points. The first is that the actual GPU is up and running. Now, up and running is a bit of an ambiguous statement because up and running can be, well, it renders a cube with no textures, but there are basic triangles and geometry in place, all the way to it can play the latest, greatest titles at 5 billion frames a second. There's like that huge gap of, middle ground. There's no, both extremes. But reality is it's probably some type of middle ground where some games are running, some applications are running like 3D Mark or what have you, but occasionally it crashes out, or not so occasionally in some instances. The other reason that we're talking about this story is, once again, according to their sources, 7nm is looking really good right now. However, the statement is still not 100% clear, because you can either take 7nm looking good to be that yields are really good, or the performance of the card and the chip itself is outperforming expectations. So you can either say that they're getting better performance or better power efficiencies, or both. Or it's possible, of course, that they could be getting better yields along with the performance as well. Much like Polaris before it, the rumours are that Navi 10 will focus on the mid-range gaming segment of the market. And to be clearer, the price point AMD are targeting is around the $250 mark. As you can probably imagine, if you were to look at the Steam hardware surveys, where the GTX 1060, for example, is one of the most popular cards, and 1080p is the most popular resolution, that value, that segment of the market is perhaps the most lucrative, and therefore from AMD's perspective makes a lot of sense to nail down. So then, what type of performance will we be expecting from Navi? Once again, they are targeting the mid-range segment of the market, but it's imperative to realize that mid-range is not mid-range of 2017 or 2018. It would be targeting the mid-range section of the market in 2019, so next year. And if you were to take a look at the history of, let's say, Polaris and AMD's comments of that particular GPU at the time, they said much the same, that they were going to be targeting the mid-range, that they wanted to bring down the cost of then virtual reality to gamers, and so that they were targeting a performance of the R9 390, or, to put it in a different way, the GTX 980, almost said 1080 there. So we can reasonably assume then that we're going to see performance roughly, at the very least, the same as this, the GTX 1080. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a little bit higher. Just from looking at NVIDIA's current lineup, we've got, of course, got the RTX 2080 Ti, the 2080 Vanilla, along with the RTX 2070. Now, the 2070 is probably roughly the card that we can expect AMD to target at the very best scenario. The RTX 2070 is a little faster, depending upon the game, of course, than the GTX 1080. It basically, in terms of the tiers, you've got the RTX 2080 Ti, the RTX 2080, the GTX 1080 Ti, then the RTX 2070, and then finally the GTX 1070, the 1080, and then you've got, of course, the other cards in the Pascal lineup. So from the perspective of AMD, to grab a lot of market share, targeting the 1080 or the 1080 Ti makes a lot of sense. There are a couple of other things that we can take into consideration as well. The first thing is that Senior Vice President of Engineering at AMD Radeon Technologies Group, his name is David Wang, suggested that AMD will not be launching Navi on an MCN. Instead, it will be the standard monolithic die. Or to put it into a different perspective, they won't be going the route of, let's say, AMD's own Zen CPUs, where of course multiple Zen cores were bolted together using Infinity Fabric to create larger processors. AMD will not be doing this, at least with Navi. In fact, in a statement, he essentially said that for gaming right now, they don't necessarily know if that's the best route. Certainly for compute-orientated scenarios, for HPC and so on, this could be a possible solution. Nvidia, by the way, are also looking at MCN because they believe that it could also be a possible solution in the future for their own GPUs. And in fact, a theoretical GPU built with MCM is definitely more powerful than what you can build on a single monolithic die. But focusing on gaming right now, I suspect that we're going to be looking at a single monolithic die on an AMD, also on a TSMC 7nm process. There is another thing that we have to bring into consideration as well. We've all heard the rumors that Vega was shortchanged essentially in development by Lisa Su, and there was a reason behind that. A lot of the engineers who were supposed to be working on Vega, they instead got funneled over to Navi. And there's a reason, because Navi was also being created for the purposes of the next generation PlayStation. Now, how this impacts the development of the next generation Xbox Scarlett, assuming that that is even utilizing AMD, we just don't know yet, and even we don't have any clue what the basic footprint of Scarlett will be. Once again, there's supposed to be a couple of devices there. We know more about the PlayStation 5 in theory. One of the key components is supposedly Navi, and the second is some generation of Zen. Notice how I said some generation, because there are some debates based upon some leaks in terms of code optimizations and so on, whether it's Zen Plus or whether it's going to be Zen 2. But we have a fair understanding just by putting those two pieces together that we either can see an APU or two separate components on a, of course, console that would create that system. So we can essentially say that some derivative, whether that's going to be Navi 10, possibly Navi 14, which is going to be filtered down a little bit, or maybe some custom variant of Navi, which is probably more likely, at least in my opinion, is going to be for the PlayStation 5. So Navi is going to be rather interesting. Navi to me is going to represent a really good value proposition for gamers, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on Nvidia right now in the mid-range section of the market. In fact, we've also seen rather quick responses from Nvidia. The RX 590, which is essentially an RX 580 just with higher clocks, is going to be coming out over the next few weeks from what we're hearing, and Nvidia are responding to that by releasing the GTX 1060 with GDDR5X memory, so it's using the GP104 core. It's a shame that Nvidia didn't choose to up the CUDA core count by, let's say, a couple of hundred. That would be rather nice if they enabled a couple of additional SMs. It would have put an awful lot of pressure on AMD and probably phased out, or at least crushed out, the RX 590, depending on pricing. But it is what it is. We also have a couple of other things we need to discuss. The first one being Navi 20. So Navi 20, it appears to be the high-end version of Navi, and from what we can understand is going to be built on the 7nm Plus architecture. From the rumors, this card is not going to be released in 2019, whereas the Navi 10 architecture, the mid-range, is, at least according to these rumors, probably going to be unveiled at some point in the first half of 2019. It's possible this is not going to be CES, therefore. So the first half of 2019, and the launch is going to be the third quarter. The good bet is that we're going to see 2020 at least for the launch of Navi 20. Of course, things can change, and obviously that's going to have a lot more performance. AMD's employee, I don't remember the chap's name, but it was on the Forenix forums. He is working on the Linux optimization side. He actually let slip that the next generation architecture from AMD, not Navi. This is the successor that we keep seeing on all of those slides, which is going to be post 2020, is going to be known as Arcturus, which is also the name of a star, much like Vega and Navi. And of course, that particular GPU architecture could potentially be the Super Cindy architecture. I've been through Super Cindy numerous times before on the channel, so I don't want to go over old ground in this video, but you can check out a link in the video description if you want to take a look at that. But essentially, Super Cindy, you can think of it as a new design, and it is a combination of VLIW, very long instruction word, which was the older AMD architectures before GCN. And then, of course, we've got SIMD, Single Instruction Multi-Data, which was GCN onwards. Theoretically, the idea behind this would be that we see a culmination of improved graphics performance, but we also have the ability to be able to run a lot of compute-orientated stuff as well. It's going to be interesting to see whether Super Cindy is for Navi, which could make sense given, of course, it will be for the PlayStation 5, possibly the Xbox as well, or it might be Arcturus as well. So that's just a few things to take into consideration. So a lot of folks are asking my opinion in terms of performance, and just to summarize, I personally think we're going to see a card which is very capable of 1440p in the year 2019. I don't think it's going to be RTX 2080 levels or anything like that, because that would be beyond mid-range, but I would not be surprised if we saw a card which is capable of at least GTX 1080 levels of performance. Those, by the way, are the rumors that are circulating from both Fuzzilla sources as well as other sources that AMD are targeting at minimum the GTX 1080, and it makes sense because, once again, if we look historically, for example, the RX 480, when it launched, it was targeting the GTX 980, and AMD in that particular time frame did say that they were targeting the mid-range, and they were looking to bring virtual reality to gamers. I wouldn't be surprised if AMD said something like, we are looking to bring higher refresh rates to gamers, or we are looking to bring 4K to gamers, or we're looking to bump the resolution from 1080p standard to 1440p and bring down the price of entry. All of those, of course, would be great marketing ploys for AMD. So my personal opinion for them to do that, and just based upon what we know the gains are with 7nm, and it just making sense, I'd suspect we're going to see AMD targeting at least GTX 1080, possibly GTX 1080 Ti, or another way to look at it is Vega 56, Vega 64 levels plus several percent. And what about Vega then? Because a lot of folks are going to say, well, what happens? Because you've got Vega 64, does that mean that there's going to be another Vega? Does that mean they're going to release like a Vega X2? My personal opinion, and I'm saying this with no industry sources, but it just makes sense. I think that AMD are going to phase out Vega, Vega 56 and Vega 64s. They're going to instead possibly change it to Vega 7nm. They're going to, of course, release those cards specifically for the purposes of HPC, high performance computing, and professionals, so the Radeon Instincts and that type of thing, and the Radeon Pros. And then we're going to see those cards phased out for gaming. So 56s and 64s are going to be phased out for gaming. Navi is going to be what AMD push for gaming, and then eventually they're going to move on to the high end. And now we're going to move over to Intel, but no, not on their graphics side. Instead, AMD have put a lot of pressure on Intel, of course, on the CPU side of things, but it's not helped by Intel themselves and the various delays of 10nm. I could write an essay, to be honest with you, and by an essay it would probably be thicker than several encyclopedias of the history of 10nm and the delays we've seen, and I'm not going to bore you with the history of it because, well, yeah, we all know about it. But long story short, it has been a continuous source of frustration from the folks at Intel, along, of course, with consumers. And so we're in this position right now where we see a Coffee Lake refresh with the 9900K and other such processors, which is using an improved version of 14nm, essentially. And no harm, no foul, the 9900K is a really nice processor. We've looked through the performance of it, but it's fair to say that the 10nm has been slightly delayed. And there are some new rumors going around because, of course, that we actually may see 10nm essentially canned from Intel. Now, The website that we're reporting this is the website Semi-Accurate. I'm going to link to the article, of course, in the video description, but it is important to know that Intel and Semi-Accurate don't have the best history, and I'm not bad-mouthing Semi-Accurate here. I'm not throwing them under the bus. I'm not saying that they have, like, you know, that they do terrible reporting. I'm simply saying that Charlie over at Semi-Accurate doesn't always look favorably upon Intel, so do take that into consideration. But even so, it's not like he's just writing this based upon his own personal beliefs. He apparently does have sources who are citing this, and well, here we go. According to Semi-Accurate, they have several sources who they cite as reliable that said that Intel have already made the decision to can 10nm, and they believe that this is because of economic costs and several other reasons. In fact, Intel have just split manufacturing into 3 different segments, and some analysts are actually now reporting that Intel are up to 5 years behind TSMC's fabrication and that they may never actually catch up. So once again, Intel have separated their divisions into 3 separate ones. The first is technology development, and this is led by CTO Mike Maybury, manufacturing operations led by Ann Keller, and finally supply chain led by Randir Thakur. So there are a couple of options here. They could, of course, farm out TSMC or another company in the short term to start doing manufacturing for them, for the CPUs in its entirety, which I highly doubt. Another possibility is they could move to a less lofty goal. So for example, they could go to 12nm or something like that. Or they could just keep moving forward. They could go for 10nm, or they could skip forward and move to 7nm. Once again, this is depending upon if you believe these rumors or not. Personally, I don't think Intel will abandon 10nm. I personally believe that they're going to continue forward with the project and get it out the door. But it will be interesting to see if they can.
So a last-minute update to the story has emerged from Intel themselves on their official Twitter account, Intel News. It says, and I quote, "Media reports published today that Intel are ending work on the 10nm process are untrue. We are making good progress on 10nm. Yields are improving consistent with our timeline we shared during our earnings report." End quote. By the way, apologies for the change in audio. I'm actually recording this on different hardware because this is literally last minute. And I think it further demonstrates that, well, these rumours are most likely not true. And in my personal opinion, Intel will be releasing 10nm processors.
AMD are putting Intel under a lot of pressure right now, and not just in the marketplace in terms of, like, for us retail consumers. I've said before, and I'll say again, that perhaps the best release AMD have done in years, and I'm talking many years, whether it's the GPU side of things or what have you, is Zen. Because it not only put Intel under a lot of pressure, which is good for us as consumers, but it also made AMD competitive again and actually pretty much saved the company in terms of financial viability. Zen is an amazing processor. It has shortcomings, and I'm not here to say that it's a perfect CPU. It certainly doesn't have quite the IPC of Intel, and it of course misses the clock speed goals of Intel. And we can see that with the 9900K. But here's the thing, and there's always a thing, isn't there? If you were to take a look, and this is just being very matter of fact, very black and white with no shades of grey, for the average consumer, if I were to tell you, well, you can pick up an i9 9900K, and currently the prices in the UK, by the way, are ludicrous. Retailers are charging over £600 for a 9900K, way over. And so, of course, price gouging doesn't even begin to enter into the equation. It's just ridiculous. Compare that to the Ryzen 7 2700X, which AMD did a very smart thing. They kept the price stable, and then the moment AMD heard Intel were launching this their series of processors, they cut the price. And it's not much, it's around 10%, depending upon the SKU, it's around 5 or 10% if memory serves, but it's enough, right? It now means that the 2700X is under $300 US, around $280. In fact, sometimes you can get deals on it and get rebates. So the problem is that you've got the i9 9900K, which is, yes, the best processor, without any question. If you've got the funds, well, sir or madam, go forth and buy the 9900K if gaming's your shtick. But if you want to do other stuff, you could pick up a decent deal on like a Threadripper processor, like a 1920X. And, you know, even a 1950X, if you get a really good discount, isn't that much difference. You do have to get quad channel memory and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, if you're spending that amount of cash, the memory situation probably is not going to make or break for you. So in terms of content creation, then, Threadripper is probably a better way to go. But pure gaming wise, 9900K is a really nice processor. I just feel that a lot of folks are just going to go with the 9700K, which is fine. You know, it's not any skin off anyone's nose. It is what it is. So it's going to be really interesting. My point is, by the time Zen 2 comes out over the next several months, what Intel have left, what they can counter with. Are we going to see Zen 2, which of course will be the Ryzen 3000 series? What are we going to see? Are we going to see an increased core count? Some rumors say yes, other rumors say hell no. Are we going to just see increased clock speeds? Some of the rumors are that we're going to see at least 5 GHz on that particular processor, perhaps a little less, perhaps a little more, but let's say AMD can hit 5 GHz with increased IPC. The rumors in terms of IPC are around 13%, which is pretty darn impressive. That basically means that if they can do that at the same type of price point, $300 US, $350 US, with the same core count, that would be incredible. But if they can increase the core count to, let's say, 12 cores with $400 US with all the other bits and pieces we've just said, that'll be very interesting to see how Intel can counter. And that's not even getting, of course, into the HPC/server market. With all of that said, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. If you did, well, you know what to do. You can subscribe and click the like button, and also comment on what you're planning to do in terms of the graphics card segment right now. Are you just holding fire with what you've got? Do you not care at this point and just going to buy the latest and greatest card that you can get your hands on? And also you can find us on Patreon, which of course is linked also in the video description, and you can also find an Amazon affiliate link. Just to say that if you did want to buy anything, including even a pot of coffee, then of course it does provide a few cents for the channel, which does help us buy like camera equipment and memory cards and goodness knows what else we need for the running of the channel, which of course helps us produce the best content possible for you all. With all of that said, thanks again very much for watching, and all of the new subscribers, the comments, and thanks very much for all of the social interaction as well. It is absolutely amazing to hear from you all. With all of that said, take care of yourselves. Bye for now.